All right, so this is now day 3. We made the levain, we have the poolish. Now we're going to take the poolish from yesterday. I'm going to add 1 cup of room temperature water into it just to kind of start to break it up a little bit. So once we've got it in there, we can use the spatula to start to break it up. It doesn't have to be crazy broken up. The mixer will help break it up pretty nicely. The one thing we are going to need is some flour. So in this case, we're using central milling. This is a nice white bread flour with, I think they call it sprouted, some sort of sprouted bean. I can't remember what it is now, but it's got a little bit more enzymatic help with it. So we're going to take the batter with the water in it, dump it into the mixing bowl, scrape as much as you can, just to make sure you get all that sour goodness. And if you leave a little bit, that's just fine too. But we grew it, we may as well try and eat it. So it is a wonderful treat to be able to have this broken down sour batter to help make the sourdough. So now we're going to add about 2.5 cups of the flour. So this is where it gets a little interesting. Instead of weighing it, we just use the volumetric measurers. I start out with about 2.5. You'll see in a minute that it is not completely, it's not quite enough. So we got to add a little bit more during the mix down. But that will be seen. So that was a salt, and let's see, it was 1/2 tablespoon of salt and a little bit of diastatic malt powder, which I like to add for a little bit of texture. So we'll go ahead and push that onto the mixer, put our magical dough hook on there, get it ready to go, and then we're going to mix this basically until it's pretty well integrated. I'll start it on 1 until we get some integration, put it up to 2, maybe 3, just depending on how it's mixing that day. But here's part of it right now. So you can see that it's mixing, it's starting to kind of come together. Don't want to add too much flour until you can see that all the flour that you've already got is partially integrated. I'm going to add a little bit at a time. I think I ended up adding a little bit more than another 1/4 cup. So this one ended up being about 2 3/4 cup. So, at this point, we've got a pretty nice looking dough ball. Pretty elastic, pretty supple. So I'm going to go ahead and take that and dump it onto the counter and just let it sit for a few minutes just to help it rest. No big deal if you go on to the next step, but I like to let it rest just a few minutes. So we've got a glass bowl, a little bit of olive oil spray. Doesn't really matter what you use, as long as it's slick so it doesn't stick to the bowl. And, realistically, you don't even really need the spray. With the glass bowl, you can just kind of scrape it out. So part of this process is making a decent dough ball. This is where I am different than a lot of the other YouTubers and sourdough bakers. I dough this up the way we used to dough ball when I made pizzas. So this is just basically a push in the center, stretch out the edge. Eventually it makes a pretty decent little tight dough ball. Seal the bottom, and then once it's ready, and just toss it in the bowl. Now, normally what I'll do is I'll put water in my Dutch oven. Just some warm water, and then I'll put the glass ball on top, kind of like a double boil for my dough. But I didn't do that on this one, and the dough ball ended up being a little bit smaller. But no big deal. Cover it, let it sit for 2.5 hours. So at this time, 2.5 hours has gone by. We've had our bulk rise. See, not much of a rise here. But the next step after this is you can either refold the dough. In this case, it didn't grow enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and use the Dutch oven. I'm gonna put hot water in the bottom of the Dutch oven. Just hot tap water, doesn't have to be crazy hot, just enough to make it feel like it's warm enough to double and multiply the yeast. So I'll go ahead and get, about a quart or two of water in there. Not much, just enough to keep it warm for a while. And then, so we'll take that, put it back on the back burner, and throw the glass bowl right on top of that. And then after that, we will take our wet tea towel, damp tea towel, and cover it just to keep the moisture inside of it. So with this is a half-hour rise like this. You can see got much more puffy. So after a half hour, we do the same thing. We fold it in, really start pushing into the center. You can see how nice and elastic and supple it is. So we're just pushing, trying to get a decently tight dough ball. This might be the last time we do this. I'm not 100% sure. So we'll let this sit, again, covered on the stove for about a half hour. So at this point, we take another look, and we can see that it's risen, but in this case, we do probably need to add about another 30 minutes of rise. So don't normally do that, but for the sake of the video, we're gonna put it in the banneton. We add a bunch of flour at the bottom of the banneton, just to make it so that it is less likely to stick. So put that in there, and then once we got a decent cover on the banneton, we'll grab the dough ball pretty gently, and just drop her right in there. Just plop. Then we'll take the banneton, add a little bit of flour to the bottom of the dough ball. Sometimes I'll use cornsmeal on the bottom. It's mostly just for flavor. But I'll put it back into the glass bowl, and then take the glass bowl, put it back into the Dutch oven, and then I'll take the tea towel and put it right back on top, make for a nice little moist, warm environment, and we'll let that sit for about an hour. And so after an hour, here's what we've got for the rise. It's looking pretty darn good. In this case, because it didn't rise that well earlier, I did give it another 30 minutes to rise. So I gave it another 30 minutes at 30 this minutes point. To my timer. But usually it's 2.5 hours, half hour, 1 hour, and then at that point you kind of got to decide how much longer you want it to rise. You can see that it's pretty decent, but in this case it was still giving way a little bit, so it could have probably gone a little bit longer on the fermentation. But we're getting ready to bake here, so we're going to preheat the oven with the Dutch oven inside of it. So we'll take our 6.5 quart Dutch oven, drop it in there, get it up to 450 degrees. And once that is ready, then we will go and get our dough ready. So I've got the silicone sling, and then I put a cutting board on top. This works really well for a nice flat surface. Just flip that little guy over. And when I pull the banneton off, I haven't really ever had it stick. Get a decent amount of flour in there, but you got a nice looking dough ball sitting on the silicone sling. I've got my lame, make a few cuts at the top, Still haven't gotten too creative with it, just enough to make it so that when it rises, it doesn't break. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and grab the hot Dutch oven right out of the oven, and lid and all, take the lid off. We'll grab the sling, put the bread in, and then we're going to add some initial moisture. We've got a water spray bottle over here, and we'll add the moisture in. Definitely throws some steam. Put the lid on to capture that steam. It helps make for a really good environment. So we've got the lid back on. We put the bread back, or put the Dutch oven in the oven. This first baked part is 35 minutes. And then after 35 minutes, we take the lid off and let it continue to bake for another 3 minutes, just to get kind of brown on top. It helps a little bit, but it's fully cooked at that point. So you pull it out when it's all done, and here's what we got. Here is what the bowl looks like when it is fully cooked. Nice little beauty. You can see that where the marks were is where the dough expanded out. So, you can get creative with that. And once we're all done with that, then we can see the slice on it. The crumb of this guy is just beautiful. Perfect for slicing, making sandwiches, just having with butter and jam. It's a beauty. So there we go. That's it.